The counter-revolution is here, and Thabo Mbeki is not happy whatsoever.
So Mr. Mbeki says that basically the counter-revolution is getting rid of all the gains of the revolution. And what he's effectively saying is that the revolution was the idea of democratic centralism. In other words, the state gets to control everything. And unfortunately, the states kind of mucked it up. So the counter-revolution is to basically privatize what the state can't do. In that respect, well, that's exactly what's happening in South Africa.
Yeah, so Thabo Mbeki is completely right. He says South Africa is going to be a blueprint for the future because the privatization of state functions is happening at a record rate in this particular country. And he calls this a counter-revolution because it threatens democracy and, the ANC must be wary of it. If this sounds like the vestiges of like old school retarded communism, well done, because that's exactly what Thabo Mbeki actually is. The counter-revolution is not something that we necessarily like as nationalists, but it is something that is absolutely necessary in South Africa because the revolution, i.e. the ANC rule, has completely destroyed every state institution in its wake. So what alternatives are there?
It's very difficult to make electricity a degree of a profit-making entity. Why? Because you kind of need it to run as an individual of the state. I mean, ideally, it's the cheapest possible. So in that instance, rail transport is another one. Like, you can't have two trains going up the same line, right? I mean, they're going to have single use. So it becomes very difficult to kind of allow the market forces, the market efficiencies that Adam Smith type economics would bring. Instead, you kind of have to look at certain functions that the state provides and say, yeah, but they're there for the purpose of state good. The good being all of us should have cheap electricity so that we can grow an economy. Or let's have a good railway network because then it allows individuals freedom of movement and to be able to get to work and job locations and see family and so forth. Right, so those entities, traditionally, the state would almost run non-profit and in some instances even run at a loss because they would be for the purposes of a national good. But ladies and gentlemen, that only works if the state actually provides those services. If the state is not able or not capable of providing those services in the first place, then the idea of the social good or the arguments of the social good doesn't apply.
Privatization does lead to unintended consequences. Again, increased prices. It can also diminish the state capabilities to deal with, social issues in South Africa. All of that is correct, but let's not forget, Thabo Mbeki is the one that implemented cadre deployment. It was during his time that load shedding reared its head. It was Thabo Mbeki who essentially created the foundation for the failure of South Africa in terms of the state itself. So for him to turn around now and say, well, the privatization is a real problem and counter-revolutionary, it's only counter-revolutionary because your revolution from 1994 has been such a dismal failure. It follows every other African liberation revolution we have seen in this particular continent. The difference between South Africa and other parts of Africa is that South Africa have a skilled citizenry that creates the alternatives, but through necessity, not because they are counter-revolutionary.
So we have to look at it with that in mind and say, yes, the state is losing its power. And for us, that's a good thing, because in this instance, the state is retarded. It's unable to provide the basic services that it needs to provide. There is no border fence, lest we forget. There is no home affairs. They're incapable of providing the basic services that they need to provide. Let us also not forget that SAPS itself is unable to fulfill its constitutional mandate. All of the remits, all of the arms of the state are unable and incapable of performing. And for us, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing in the context in which we live. So personally, I'm quite in favor of a strong state, an efficient state, a state that provides the necessities for people to self-actualize. Good education, good healthcare, good railways, and all the rest of it. In that sort of state, privatization will never happen because there's no need to privatize it. You don't go to Sweden and think of yourself, oh, how can I get, solar panels on my roof because I really need it. No, Sweden has like nuclear reactors and stuff. They'll never run out of electricity because why? They've got a strong, capable state. But the ANC has not created a strong, capable state. They created a very weak, almost stateless society. And therefore, I'm not going to wait around for the revolution to fix what it has broken. I'm going to privatize as much as I can my household, my children's education, my healthcare, my transport, because I know fully well that the revolution is bullshit and has failed South Africa. But I'm not going to stand here as a nationalist and say that I'm waiting for South Africa to get better. No, I'm just going to take it on my own accord, become very libertarian in this particular instance, and get off grid as much as possible, knowing full well the state can't fulfill my needs at all. So I'm not going to rely on the state if it can't do its basic job.
However, I think what we can both agree on, privatization of the state, is going to become inevitable. The state's control is diminishing on a day-to-day basis. We both agree on that. And from that viewpoint, we see South Africa as being a pioneer in the world to come in terms of the stateless society. This is the same message we've been saying for some time.
Yeah, when you look back in time at the ANC's legacy, you'll have football stadiums and the destruction of South Africa as a state in its entirety. So yeah, thank you ANC.